Hello, everyone. We are here at the Forward Movement Podcast, and today we have a guest speaker, Sally Hoy, with us. I came across Sally on Instagram and immediately felt this draw of, wow, this human knows something that must be shared with others, especially regarding this conversation of education reform and restoration. So, Sally, I would love to open up the space and have you introduce yourself to all who are tuning in to this episode.
Yeah, thank you. That's beautiful. I am uh, shockingly successful for myself blogger. I started in 2010 when I was in the middle of the public school system, teaching kindergarten, going as, the question I think that has rung through so many of us, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way of educating our children in the public school system. So I started just blogging and offering alternatives to worksheets. I've left that trace of who I was then on my blog. But what happened that was so shockingly surprising is as I made offers, like in 2011, my first offer to have people join me in the conversation through a course, they joined me. It's like, what? And so, I just kept, I consider my courses and offerings conversations, and it just kept growing and growing. And what I would say is there are amazing human beings out there committed to the welfare of children and their learner identity, which I think is really what's at stake, at the base of it. And then at the same time, educator identity is at stake in the system. And so that is my passion. And now I serve almost 300,000 people and over 120 countries. And yeah, just it's an honor. It is a complete honor that takes me to my knees.
Sally, how has the act of forward movement transformed your life?
Yeah. Um, I would say in my act of serving the conversation through my offerings, I have evolved my own identity and confronted and transformed those constraints in my own view that I couldn't see. What you don't know that you don't know. I didn't know I didn't know. Like the biases that exist as barriers to identity. And one of the things that rose in my work that, again, just sits at the heart of what I do is that as educators, when we receive children, and I am committed and serve early childhood. So we might have this, like I worked for a Head Start with 3-year-olds, who I'm being and how I'm relating to those children, to the environment, to what I'm presenting as curriculum is shaping who they're becoming in their own identity and how they view themselves. And when I ask, educators, think about the teacher who made a difference. It's usually one. It's not. I had 13 teachers in my journey that, really saw me. And so I think that's more more than method is relationship for me.
And
Who are we being?
absolutely, and how has your identity shift, Sally, transformed, and maybe not because of yourself, but because of the youth that you're working with? What part of you has opened up in a deeper way because of how you have been engaging with them?
Well, the biggest piece for me is freeing myself for them from that subconscious programming from the assembly line model of education, as Seth Godin calls it, where the child is an empty vessel that we're filling with information and testing to see if they got it, where the educator is an empty vessel, which is one point, I mean, Seth points it out, is an empty vessel as well, distributing the information. They're like the machine that's doing the filling. And then the other piece that Seth points out, he has a piece called Stealing the Dreams, and it's on his blog. I highly recommend people read it. He's just brilliant in how he makes this visible. He also has interviews around it that are just beautiful. But then parents are ashamed if their children are not receiving the data and information and regurgitating it properly, then it's an issue. If the child has any decline of participation, oh my, we have a problem. And so I think it's interesting that for myself, all of that was in me in the subconscious because that was the system I went through. That was how I was educated. So if you go back to my blog in the beginning of Fairy Dust Teaching, and I have another one called Wunderled. I wanted a fresh start, but I didn't want to kill my past either. I want to honor that. Is that I was just still doing teacher-directed activities in a new form. It wasn't a worksheet, it was a creative teacher-directed activity. But the children still didn't have any say in it, you know? Yet I thought I was being like, so, like, hey, look at me, I'm breaking free. No, I was still in the shackles of the system. I was just putting whipped cream on a cow patty, right? Does that make, yeah.
Absolutely. The visual right now I have is like you have the same body, it's just a different outfit that you're wearing. The body
Exactly.
of the system, and you're like, hey, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. It's so much better. But in reality, you just got sparkles on you.
It's exact. And a lot of, and again, I'm all about being as authentic and transparent as possible. In 2015, I skyrocketed in my reach, but I was still sharing cow patties called play invitations. And, I still advocate for play invitations, but it's how we approach it. It's where does the intent come from and what is expected from children. So, for me, children, the biggest thing in early childhood is children must have choice. If we're serving their development, which the system says it does, if we're really committed to serving their development, it's a play-based environment with full choice. They have the right to choose where to play, with who to play, how to play, and with how to put it, how they can take the materials wherever they want. So, maybe there's Play-Doh on a table and they decide they're going to use it to cook with in housekeeping. 99% of the classrooms would never allow that. I say, find a way, make what we call a yes environment. The reason those, and then the fifth right is the right to decline participation, because self-awareness of one's own boundaries has to begin at some point. And if you are engaging children in a relationship with you and the ideas in your classroom, they will eventually enter the conversation. The reason all of this is so important is that this is how executive functioning is built. Imagine a child walking into a classroom, seeing all these possibilities, all these friends, and then they have to choose. That's planning. That's mapping. What am I going to do? That's all of the skills that it takes to be a highly functioning human being. In most early childhood classrooms, all of the decisions are made for them, even what they're going to engage in thinking. Even the thinking is done for them.
So when you began this bit of the conversation, Sally, tears started to come to my eyes because to envision a world where all of the children in this early childhood bracket have the opportunity to simply play and to choose, to have full autonomy over themselves is such a gift. Is such a gift. And when you mentioned how your own way of interacting with the youth and also guiding other educators to interact, it went from the space of wearing a sparkly outfit and still shackled into the system to really letting it all go and seeing what the child needs is a really powerful example of how, as a human, we can shift at any moment in time. And it doesn't mean that what we did in the past was wrong. It means that it's building blocks to different awareness. And for the child or for the parent or for the community member who's witnessing you in that journey, now gives them the opportunity to raise their hand to shifting paths. So that's something that's really inspiring. Absolutely. For any educator out there who's like, wow, I am fully in the shackles and I've believed this. Like I studied this, I put all
Mm.
of my hours and intention into learning this, and now I'm in the system. So how could I even step away? Because I've dedicated all this money and time to it. But you're a living example of, hey, step away and witness what life could be when you guide children to play. And I'm wondering, Sally, how have you seen the shift in a child's life from what you used to do to what you're doing now?
Well, one thing I think is really important is that, so I'll give an example. I had a child in my class who loved, and this was when I started teaching, so I've had kind of an interesting career. I started in an open play environment and then moved into public education because of my commitment. And that's when I really got aware how much it had a grip on me. But I did have free play before then. And one child in particular, free play in the sense of Waldorf education. Um, I had a child who loved plants, loved them so much. I even said, let's bring scraps from our home of, different vegetables you're eating, and we, put carrot tops and celery and all sorts of stuff and dirt and see what's going to grow. And we had a blast. I said to her mother at one point, I said, she is such a botanist. Every time we're on the playground, it's all about plants. What took me to my knees was fast forward. My daughter's a history teacher at a local high school, has this girl in her class. Guess what she went on to college to be? So when that happened, it sparked something in me. Like you said, the seeds that drop, like in the seed dropped in my soul that really didn't take root until the last 7 years, probably. That just like a plant, like the old thing, it's like in the oak is the oak tree. In the child is a disposition and set of interests and passions that ultimately become a human being engaged in a certain way with the world. So here was this child, and her passion was plants. It's like I was dealing with that oak, the acorn. I couldn't see the oak tree, but evidence was there. So it really has I don't know. It's one of those things that keeps coming over and over and over again in my soul that that we are ripping children off of their futures when we don't allow play in early childhood. Because in play, when they choose and free play in early childhood, there's all sorts of stuff called play, and it's not play. Play is freely chosen, self-initiated, intrinsically driven. When they do that, how, they discover their preference, their likes, their dislikes, what engages their passion. If if children don't have that, then we have, and we see it, generations of people who go, I don't know what I want. I don't know who I am. My question is, how much are you playing? I play every day still.
Oh, absolutely, Sally. One of my main pillars in life is play. My life is centered around play, and I've even gone so far as dropping hours. I work at a Montessori setting at the moment with early childhood,
Oh,
which is really interesting because I do focus on play and I do focus on creativity, and I don't really see either in that space. And not to bash something, it's more of just witnessing what my strengths and my desires and my interests are, and also discovering what I truly feel in the depths of my soul is important for the youth, which is play.
yeah.
Because when I see more people play, I notice how their creativity comes online. I notice how they're able to
Mhm.
focus and engage and get sucked into something that they're inspired in. And they're able to work however many hours they want to work to create what they want to create. And I wonder, Sally, through your own experience right now working with these youth and having play be at the center, how do you find that the expression of micromanaging or controlling the environment to have ease throughout the day kind of lets go? Do you find that that offers the space for educators to like breathe and exhale a bit?
Oh yeah, and this is where I think it gets a little complex for people. Now, to be clear, I'm in a setting right now that is like a play lab. I have the same children coming, but it's a hummingbird cottage, but it's not a daily, it's a weekend experience for them and us. So and it's in a setting that I don't have licensing. I don't have any regulations to fulfill. So I can really let go and relax because there's no one looking over my shoulder, right? So, I had a photographer come and she brought her son and he climbed the bookshelf to the very top. It's like, had I been in the classroom, I might have been freaking out. But, his mom was there. It was a different setting. Um, I could be relaxed. So in the classroom, and especially, I think I have a real commitment to our public school system because this is where the majority of the children in our nation are educated. And now we have a universal pre-K program that is going to, I estimate, within the next 10 years, all states will have it. I'm in Oklahoma. I began teaching 4-year-olds in public school in 2004. And I think one of the biggest things about holding space for children is that free play doesn't mean we're not holding space. And it's not a free for all. That one of the ingredients that must be there, and it took me a long time to figure out how do I say this? And I turned to my own mothering to figure out the wording. And it's just respect that the environment has to hold as a crucial value respect for each other. So, and I'll go into that in a minute, and then respect for objects and materials. That whenever materials were not being respected, that it was a time to pause and have a conversation. That we're not going to, put them in timeout and scold because that's not going to heal whatever disrespect is living there. We want to have a conversation. We want to pause. We want to look at, what can we do so that our materials are not treated like that? And what play urge are you experiencing that maybe I could find another outlet for that isn't going to damage, so it's like I always think I have to look at children as having positive intent. If they're slamming something, and it's, breaking my materials or things that I have brought to the classroom, I'll look and go, okay, what can they do? Maybe I need to take them into the woods at the cottage and let them slam wood or whatever I can find. So there's that. Um, and then respect for each other. One of the things I think that is from the system of the assembly line comes the idea that compliance is a successful student is compliant, a successful educator has compliance from her students or his students or their students. And I think that we then shortchange students by when there is conflict, upset, breakdown, we're not pausing and giving them skill. So like from the Montessori tradition, I love the peace table. It's saying conflict is a part of our curriculum. We're here for you. You can't work it out, we'll help you work it out. Emotional dysregulation, transitions have you fall in tantrum. It's okay. That's part of who we are. That's a curriculum in our, that's an important part of what we do is help you regulate. And I think early childhood specifically is the time that the limbic system is developing. So self-regulation is the work of the young child. Self-regulation is the work. So, when we put worksheets down and ask them to do the work of the neocortex, we're not serving what's developing right now.
Isn't it so interesting that we live in a world currently within the United States that the system and the structure has been built in something that isn't supportive to science, isn't supportive to the development of the youth, which really, really is confusing a bit. And
Mm-hmm.
also, when you speak about compliance, Sally, it's, for the child to be compliant, for the teacher to have compliance. But then when we take a step back, it's because the educator must be compliant to that which the compliance is coming down. It's this trickle effect. And to have conversations with educators in the public
Yeah.
school system, it's like, wow, I don't even I don't really even have any educators right now in the public setting speaking in this season, Sally, because what if I say something and I get in trouble through the district? Or what if I say something?
Yeah.
It's that ability to speak up for what you know in the soul of your body is not supportive for the youth, but you're stuck in this wheel and you don't know how to get out. So I'm wondering, how has the introduction and implementation of that which you're experimenting with now, Sally, helpful to the educator in the public school district? What changes or micro changes have you seen or heard of for a public school educator?
Well, I think first, I think the first place I want to stand in the public school educator is that I think when we know the public school system is not working, and many times with that not working, teachers are slammed. And so I just want to say, in my experience, the public school educators, and like I'm on the verge of sobbing saying this, are some of the most epic, beautiful human beings I've ever met. I worked in a highly academic setting in kindergarten, and those educators were some of the finest humans I'd ever met. They fully embraced my wacko ways, for them, because they were completely in the system. They were completely into worksheets and teacher directed activities. And so I think it's important to honor These are human beings who are giving their heart and soul. Um, in terms of methodology, I think one of the things I see is it's going to take time to slowly move the wheel to have, like I tell people, bring 1 hour of free play, and you are bringing a lot. You have morning of compliance, teacher-based activities, fine. I know you have administration, you were hired by a by a school district to deliver, you got to deliver. They're like, that's the thing, right? And part of the issue for early childhood educators is public schools pay more, and you get all of those, but you get retirement, you get insurance, you get all of these things, right? So I want to honor the reality, because I think sometimes people who just don't honor the reality, like this job is paid so much better than the child care center, and I'm getting all of these benefits and et cetera. And they hired me to deliver a curriculum. So I know in my own work with principals and administrators, we have to arm ourselves and ask for spaces. Like I would like an hour of free play in the afternoon. You start small, and that's what my blog shows in those early days. I would say, I'm going to do guided drawing versus worksheets so that if it's to develop their eye-hand coordination, I'd rather not use the worksheet and do the guided drawing. Like slowly move the needle. I think we have to train and educate the system and be willing to be patient to find where can we get space to bring what children need. It's not going to happen overnight. We cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater, because it's just not going to, you're going to get fired. Um, and I think that's the hard truth of changing the system.
I so
It's
appreciate this.
tell me.
Absolutely, because it's like the past, the season is only for guest speakers, and it's really powerful because I came into this conversation really passionate about like this needs to be burned down, everyone. It's not working. And it's so beautiful, to shift perspectives with more awareness and having these conversations be elevated because that's where the restoration came through. One of our previous speakers, Janae Dixon, she has worked in different higher ed areas within public education and also outside of public education. And she brought restoration into the conversation. And I love this, Sally, because it's exactly what you're speaking of, to really enter slowly and to allow these micro shifts to take
That's it.
place. And even what you're speaking of, it's like, yes, I'm going to advocate to the administration and to the principal to have this hour block in the afternoon, and it's still going to honor the standards. It's just going to look different from what maybe the norm has been for the past however many years. So it sounds like there's a little bit of space to experiment potentially when you utilize your voice to advocate for not only the youth, but also yourself. And because I'm certain too that the educator themselves feels a bit more at ease when that space of play is able to be incorporated throughout the day or at the end of the day.
One of the techniques I used in the kindergarten classroom instinctually. So, as an instinct, as an educator, I am committed that children have voice because I felt like I had no voice. Excuse me, I have a cold. Um, and that is like there would be the curriculum that the district gave us, or there'd be what the team of kindergarten teachers were going to do. And I would sit down with my students, 25, 26 kindergartners, and go, this is what we're required to learn. This is one way other classrooms are going to do it. How should we do it? And then we engaged in ideas, and they loved it. That honor of, oh, I get to have co-creating of my education. And at one point, one of the children in one of my one of the years in my kindergarten came and said, everyone else does worksheets. Can we do worksheets? And I said, well, I think that you should make the worksheet. And for about a month, the children made worksheets and would hand them to me and say, will you make copies for everyone? Now, if you can imagine a kindergartner making a worksheet, it was literally incomprehensible, no structure. Some of them made just scribbles but again, giving them agency and voice in the process. So I also urge educators just allowing children to be engaged in the conversation about what there is being delivered to them and having a place where you can give them choice and voice is huge. And again, I'll go back to COVID really drove this home to me when everybody had to go virtual, is that ultimately for the child's learner identity, it's you. You are the real curriculum.
Sally, the sound just cut out. I can't hear you, which is very odd.
Weird.
I hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe the past 45 seconds it was silent.
Okay. Yeah. So what I was going to say is that, who you are for the children, if you think one child is absolutely adorable and wonderful and another child's pretty neutral for you, and you're standing at the door and you see the neutral child, and then the adorable child walks up and your eyes light up and you're like, how are you doing? If you don't think the rest of the classroom doesn't know that, and so I think we have to really work on lighting up for every child who enters our room, that every child gets the stars in our eyes of joy, that, we are curious and committed, that the children feel we're in it with them fully. That, I think that's the first step of freeing yourself from the compliance model, is to truly love each child fully for who they are and for who they're not.
Thank you for that. I feel like that was a message of an arrow directly to the heart for myself because it is, human nature. We vibe with who we vibe with, and we don't vibe with who we don't vibe with. And also with a child, there is such beauty in every single one of them, just as there is such beauty in every single human. And as you speak, Sally, it's this connection to this childhood experience of as an educator, I will light up the same for all because I'm grateful to be here and I'm grateful to see you in your shining beauty that is the authenticity of a child. And for that skill set to then be transferred into day-to-day life with every human you meet.
A
Because
hundred percent.
similarly, every single human is going to see that. You light up for one person, but then you don't light up for that person. They're like, what happened? A mentor of mine, Sally, his name is Keone Hanalei, who's a guest speaker last season, and he really speaks about belonging. He says the
Yeah.
main thing for humanity is to remember that you belong simply by being. There is nothing else that needs to happen. And to connect that into what you just shared is I belong in the classroom with all these children, and also every single one of these children belong in this space, and they're going to know they belong because of how I am towards them. And then they're going to feel that, I wonder.
And I would assert that school shooters in early childhood had trouble socially, maybe had trouble fitting in and belonging, that you don't know what's at stake. When you, like, for some children, you might have to, it might take weeks to love them and enjoy them because they're so hard or so quirky or so out of your understanding. But you have no idea the impact about taking the time and putting them in your heart and seeing them, hearing them, valuing them for them. They may never again meet someone who does that for them. And that 1 year in their neuro architecture of their brain, it changes everything. So this is, to me, so much education. It's like, again, Seth Godin says, why educate? And for me, why educate? Why work with young children? Because I can change the course of their life. I can give them a feeling of, I am worthy. I can give them a feeling, I belong. I am loved. I have something to give.
And to allow that to
Mrs.
be
Hoy.
that.
Yeah, Mrs. Hoy saw me. So I think education is so much more. And it's, again, I really am grateful for the silver lining of COVID that really brought forth in that time when teachers had to go virtual. What did the children in trauma, with the world in trauma, need? Love. That's your curriculum. Go forth. I don't care what method you use. Go forth
With love, period.
with love. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Oh man. Yeah. And to be able to allow that into the conversation of it doesn't matter what environment you're in as an educator. It doesn't matter if you're Waldorf or public or Montessori or private. Are you are you loving? Are you love? Do you love yourself? Like I feel like all of these questions really do impact how you show up in the space. Absolutely. And
That's
even
good.
the relationship with the self, I do feel is one of the most important aspects and one of the biggest responsibilities an educator has as entering the classroom, because that also translates, I feel. And not to see it as this big, like, I need to focus on myself 24/7, or I need to like do these hard things. But it's more of just as we're offering the child an hour in the afternoon to have that play-based experience, where in your life are you allowing yourself 15, 30 an hour every day to be with yourself? Because one thing I'm noticing, Sally, and I'm so curious what your thoughts are on this, is when we ask a child to do something, or when we create an environment for a child to be as they are, but that's not being your life outside of the schoolroom, how does that translate? Because there isn't a relatability. You're not having a lived experience to then be able to foster that for the child. And wondering what your thoughts are in that realm.
I think one of the things that is important in what you're speaking to in teacher identity and how the beingness in the classroom mirrors the beingness in the world is that this is where, again, the tentacles of the system can really impact our sense of self. Is that, again, compliance being the most important thing in the assembly line. Some of the things I dealt with in my identity and still today deal with, because it's so freaking deep in me, is if there's huge conflicts break, like maybe it's one of those days, like it's the full moon, it's, Friday the 13th, it's, all the everything's stacked up against us, and the children are fighting like cats and dogs, you know, um, and I feel a failure, or I feel I can't handle this. This was a horrible day. To really listen when you go to, I can't take this. This is horrible. I'm horrible. I can't, I'm not cut out. All of those self statements, check. Is it connected to compliance and the expectation that you have a quiet room no matter what? Is it connected to, I have to be able to say, now, children, and they immediately listen and go, okay, Mrs. Hoy. It's like this Mary Poppins. I'm supposed to be Mary Poppins and I don't have the carpet bag. I'm screwed. It's like really looking at what deflates you in the classroom. And then one of the best tools I've used is the Artist Way pages. And the Artist Way pages it's from Julia Cameron. And she wrote this book decades ago. And in fact, I started doing the process when I was a practicing artist before I was an educator. And what you do is you get a cheap spiral bound notebook, and it's really important to get cheap so that you don't have the conversation of, well, I can't, you don't have to write pretty. Like, no, this is not that. And you write longhand 3 pages of just dumping what's in your head. And so I do that. I had a class of children who were wild, like they jump off tables, and getting compliance was not ever going to happen. So I'd be writing, I don't want to go to school, blah. I'd like let out all of those feelings in those pages and just release all of my stuff. And I began to see the patterns of I wanted to be a good teacher. And that meant they listened to me. It's like that at all times and in all places, no matter what, even if they've just come in the classroom from Halloween last night, it's like loaded with sugar. And, I don't want compliance anymore. I want them to honor when I say stop because it's for a really good reason. I have to keep them safe, right? So any quote appearance of compliance is not about being a good teacher. It's this is not safe. I love you and I cannot allow you to engage in this way. It's, you know, anyone who loved you would not allow you to be like this. It's not safe, either emotionally, it's not just physical, there's emotional safety, spiritual safety. I can't allow this in my classroom because it's not safe for your friends. Maybe a way they're talking could be, you know, upsetting to a child with a different faith walk. I have to protect that child. That's my job. So you see those kinds of, so I think that if we take tools and give ourselves places to express our humanity, like Artist Way pages, then who we are in the classroom begins to be who we are in the world.
I wonder who you are in the classroom on your hardest day is who other people see you as and who you see yourself as. And I'm thinking specifically of myself in these moments, Sally, when I'm overstimulated and my body doesn't feel safe, therefore now I'm going to express that unsafety outwards. And to be
Yeah.
so aware of that, of like, oh my gosh, how am I impact the classroom? How am I impacting the other children right now when I don't feel safe? And I'm so curious to see and to experiment with these pages to notice if there is a pattern related to compliance or if there isn't. Because when I went through school, I was in special education all through high school, and they stripped classes from me saying I wasn't able to. I couldn't speak any languages. They put me in a English class, like in the basement, no windows with like 3 students. It was
Oh,
not a good experience. And to think about all
no.
of this, my own childhood journey through education, and then how I stopped with becoming a licensed educator. I only have one MTEL left in the state of Massachusetts, but there's such a big part of me that is like, I cannot do this. I failed it 3 times and I cannot do it because I decide not to feed into a system that I just don't agree with. Why does an educator need to go through so many hoops to prove that they are standardized tests like success and they have these academic wisdom keys when I don't feel like that's the most important thing. I feel like to be emotionally
Mhm.
intelligent, to be able to self-regulate as an adult, and then to be able to play. especially in early childhood.
Yes.
And I'm wondering when it comes to curriculum or when it comes to that academic wisdom, do you feel that there is a space in the early childhood setting for that, or do you feel like that actually is best in these older, later years in the schooling system?
I am a huge advocate of no academics until age 7. I'm a huge, and it doesn't in the traditional sense. And this is where if we use curiosity and inquiry as a driver in the classroom, it can get very academic as children, may study. Like I was in a classroom, I had a co-teacher. We had 40 children between us. Both of us had an assistant, but our classrooms were open to each other. And one of the children in her classroom got very interested in the garbage truck that passed every day and would pick up garbage. We ended up at the garbage dump. We did all these things and studied recycling. Um, it got very deep, but it was driven by what the children had relationship to right out the window. So I think that we have to begin to be really careful about the word academic. I would say, and I haven't figured out the term to use for the traditional setting and the traditional method, but inquiry based or constructivist based is very academic, but in a much more open and honoring way, not through worksheets, but through actually walking beside the children, not in front of them, sometimes walking behind them, letting them lead. So, and the other thing I wanted to go back to what you said about self-regulation. One other thing I think I learned this probably in 2006, I think was the year my uh, son's best friend suddenly passed away. And, they were like 18. And I was devastated and I had to go to school the next day. And one thing I learned early on is the reason that substitute teacher is a meme, that the class goes crazy, is because a substitute teacher walks in and brings an artificial self. And the children know it and they poke it and they test because they want real. So when we go in the classroom, and let's say I've been out, went to a big party, had a little bit too much to drink, I'm not feeling so good walking in the next day at school, and the class is out of control. Why? Because they know I'm not normal and I'm not telling them anything. So I'd walk in and go, Mrs. Hoy went last night, stayed up way too late because I had a friend come visit me and we laughed and laughed. You guys are going to have to help me because, I need at least 3 cups of coffee, and, a little, they go like, I would have Starbucks coffee, like 4 cups show up the next day from the kids telling their parents, Mrs. Away needs coffee. Well, the day that I had to walk in the classroom with my heart, like I couldn't hardly keep from crying all day. I sat down. I started the day and I sat down and I said, Mrs. Hoy's heart is broken. And I was just sobbing. I said I didn't tell them it was my son's friends. I didn't want them to get scared. And I think that's the thing we have to be careful with young children. They get scared really easily. But I just said, someone really important to me, you know, died, just like my grandmother did. And I referenced my grandmother because it makes sense. It was the order of the universe that grandma. And then they all started sharing. I lost my blankie. It's gone. I lost my dog. They shared all of and it was the most beautiful conversation. And so I think sometimes we think we can't be our authentic self in the classroom, but children know when you can't self-regulate. I would say my body feels really tense. Can we all sit down on the carpet and breathe together? Can we do some lion breaths or snake breaths together? Because I always taught different types of breaths, I need you guys to sit with me. It makes me feel so much better. I love you guys so much. I need all your love around me, And so you see what I'm saying? So that again, we're not the old factory model where the teacher is the sage on the stage, the guru. No, we're like right there with them in the human experience.
Something's coming to mind right now is the other day it was very chaotic in the classroom and we ended up sitting in circle and I started just intuitively rubbing my temples and I expressed to everybody how great it feels to rub this part of your body when you have a headache or when you're not feeling well and then all of a sudden the children started to rub and now I'm wondering, Sally, like that's such a beautiful opportunity to witness if any children have something to share of what they do that feels good for them and then that could be like a nugget for me later. Like, I'm going to do this because the child said that feels good. So I'm going to try it now. And something I've been doing
Love that.
recently is I noticed there's a couple of children who, when they cry, they get in these crying cycles and they just don't know how to stop. So I have been recently just rubbing the top of their spine. And for some reason that I don't know the scientific reason, but it ends up being a really soothing. They stop crying almost immediately. They start humming to themselves, or I'll to them, and they have the same expression of they are now safe and they can feel what they're feeling, but they know that their body is safe. And I'm wondering too, is from your perspective, me coming in and offering that support to allow them to regulate, to feel their emotions, do you feel that that is something that is supportive for the child, or is it more of how can the child learn on their own how to regulate for themselves, or how can they learn how to do that on their own through witnessing or practicing in the classroom?
Yeah, I think imitation is such a huge part of young children. They imitate their environment. I mean, from toddlers on, they pick up the cell phone and blah, 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 blah. They're looking like their parents. I think knowing that those mirror neurons are happening in our you know, relationship to each other. So I think that's why really being a broadcaster of your own thinking process sometimes is really helpful. Like, I really feel like crying right now because my body hurts. Like sometimes I would broadcast in the middle of the classroom when they're all playing and, I just say it. Um, I think I'm going to try to sit in this chair and see if it helps. Maybe if I had a glass of water, I'll go get it for you, Mrs. Hoy. But it's just like children, if you think about how young children don't have adults talking with them, they have adults talking at them. You know, Tom Drummond, another educator online, talks about how we command, we instruct, we discipline, but do we actually just engage in human to human expression? And I think, I would share, like if I had my best friend sitting there, I would say, wow, my back really hurts. I think I'm going to sit down. Maybe I need a glass of water. That's what I'd say. Why not say it to the classroom of 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds? That they get to it embeds in their own heart and soul. I don't feel well. Maybe I should sit down. I'm going to sit. Those conversations are powerful. It's giving tools because there's no recipe. There's no um, formula for a child. This is a successful way to self-regulate. And for the teacher, this is the success path of being an educator. We have step one, step two. No, it's just like being married. There's no recipe. There's, yeah, giving 100% and being transparent and present.
The other day I was with a group of people and mostly adults who are males and don't work with youth. And I asked them so curiously, I'm like, do you have deep conversations with your friends? And most of them said no.
Yeah.
They don't have deep conversations. And I'm one, Sally, that gets in a room and even doesn't matter who it is, I'm gonna drag something out of them. We're gonna go deep. We're not in surface level. And it got me thinking of how many people in this world move through their day and utilize the limited of time or the abundance of time they have in their life to float and not go deep. And something that's coming through right now is with the youth to go deep with them, to allow them to see you and for them to be able to be seen by you. Then simultaneously looking at your principal and your coworkers and your administration. And what if, as an educator, I went to them and sat down and said, I need to sit down because I'm not feeling well and I'm feeling really overstimulated or overworked or overwhelmed with what's being asked. And what if that in itself allows then the school system in which one is in to simply see human to human and not this hierarchy of administration, principal, staff, educator, and how does that translate into the classroom?
That's a really important point. So I think one of my winning formulas, if we go formula, in the public school system is anytime I was working with a behavioral issue, upset parents or potentially upset parents, or burnout or upset or personal struggles, I would go to my principal, I would sit down, and I would say something like, um, depending on the principal too, right? But I'd say, I have this child, this is what's happening. What do you recommend? I'm not saying I'm going to use your approach, but you are my leader and I want to know, what would you do? Or I have my sister who was very ill and took about 5 years, but she was in the process of losing her life from this disease, Huntington's. And I sat down and I said, I'm having a really hard time. What do you recommend? I came to my principal before crisis. I always use my principal so that then I was informing them, then they felt they had a hand in it. And that's really important in building trust with administration, is that if you keep them apprised of anything that really is brewing, whether personal or in the classroom, and you share your strategy, it seems, even if it's working, I'd share the strategy. I would like you to give feedback, and 9 times out of 10, they're like, you've got it, trust yourself or whatever. Um, you can't believe then how it builds that trust. And when you say, I want to not rotate the children, I want them to self-select. And they look at you and go, okay, she tells me when there's problems. So if it's not working, she's going to come to me. Yes. And it just builds trust. So I think we leave administration out too much, that we need to be more collaborative with administration. And if you're in a setting where that is not comfortable or safe, find a new school. Because I have had stunning principals. Every principal would tell me ultimately several years in, how much they appreciated me. So I think that's really important, is because they get a bad rap too. They're just humans in this position of having to push down the grind of the machine. Think they're having fun? I don't think so. And if they are, if they're having fun constraining and complying and you know smashing people, get a new principal administrator.
It's beautiful, is it not, to explore this realm of education reform and restoration and to begin first in the classroom and what can shift or tweak or change, and then witness how it can completely shift the trajectory of a child's life in their adulthood. But
A
then
thousand.
all of a sudden we start to look out of that and realize that, wow, when I am who I am, knowing that I belong and have something to contribute to the classroom, then I know that is all the same for the community in which I live in and work with. So then now all of a sudden, it's not just the lives of the children that may be shifting trajectory. Now it's all of the adults in one's life that may or may not be shifting trajectory. It's like a little raindrop, and then all these ripples go out, and it all begins with the self in the center. Because if you're not there, then who's gonna do it? Someone may at some point, but
Hmm.
I feel like it does take courage to show up as you feel deep in the depths of your soul, you want to show up and not just
And
be in this like constrained position of, I don't know how to get out.
so I think I talked about the Artist Way pages. There's another tool I used in the classroom. So I think we have to have active tools to help us evolve and grow. And the other one I used was a daily reflection of my classroom. And I made it uber simple. What went really well? What didn't work or work as well as I wanted? What child did I not really connect with today? Or I have concerns about. So I like to keep in my consciousness, there's that child who never speaks up and they can disappear into the walls. They're just as at risk as the one that is yelling and screaming and getting my attention. And then what can I do tomorrow knowing all the things I've just written? So what actions am I going to take tomorrow? When I was really flowing, I'd even go, well, what's one word for today? What color was it? If today was a movie, what would it be titled? Just play creatively with it. But those four questions have you process the room in a simple way. And it take me 5 minutes. Once you get going, it's just really quick because your consciousness is trained. And then you can look at a pattern. Again, am I in a pattern of compliance? Am I in a pattern of push down? Am I in a pattern of let's get this done? Am I not just being?
The gift of awareness, the gift of
Yeah,
information, and to play with it as an experiment. A dear sister of mine,
that's it.
Charmaine, has taught me over the years and offered this to my awareness is all we're doing in this human experience of living is making choices and getting feedback. And what if we don't deem anything wrong or right? What if we deem everything an experimentation to play with and engage with? And I believe it's James Clear who wrote the book Atomic Habits.
Hmm.
And he speaks about how we can build these small habits in our life to shift the trajectory. And that's something that's coming forward, Sally, is this tool that you just offered, and even the previous tool. It's like how can we plant that into our awareness of our day to day that's easily accessible so we
Hmm.
want to engage with it. It's not a chore. And maybe sometimes it's playing with it of like, this title today is The Magical Rainbow of Life. And then this title today is The Murky Depths of the Lotus. And then
Right.
to have fun with it. I wonder if
Yeah.
that's something that is so beneficial for an educator is to instill these opportunities for you to play in your days that also support you in the long run and support your youth.
Yeah, and I think, some years I had a theme for myself. Like I'm not a theme teacher in the classroom, but I theme myself. And I did have one year that everything was pink and glitter. Not in the classroom, but in my private, like my journal was pink sparkles. I had a online notebook that I put like, you know, uh, fairy wands and, I just everything that was about the work I had to do was joyful. I'd be out and I remember finding a pen that had a wand. It would look like a wand, and I was in a place I needed to play at being a teacher and all of those things. So I let myself. Other years, it was very zen. Like I would create a feeling around my personal work. Right now, I have a business dashboard and it has like Mother Teresa's hands holding a rosary, because that's my focus right now, to be of service. How can I connect and serve? So I have spiritual images that when I open up to put in my data on my social media, you know, it's the image of being in complete service.
To go from your pink era to your service era and to be able to play with the ever-changing wheel that is what your inner child or what your inner self is asking you to focus on in
Ex-
that chapter of life.
Exactly. But play with images, play with, and of course, with the teacher theme, most of that was really at home. Because again, it would be ridiculous, to have on my counter in the classroom. It's like it would be on my machine, but my computer, but still to have, in a way, it's like having an altar. It's like this year, my teacher self is the pink and sparkles for me was I'm bringing pure joy, 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 joy. Yeah.
To be able to be that, have that be at the center. Beyond who you are, I belong. And we just got joy in the room, everyone, and that's going to be felt even on the sad days. We still have joy because I'm going back to my pink sparkly pen, and that feels really good.
Exactly. It's so good. Yeah.
Well, Sally, summarizing all that's been shared today, what's the main core shift you feel is imperative to take action on now that will help build the future of the educational system?
That again, I'm with you that I think it all starts in the teacher identity, the self. And the core first step is you are enough to change the system. And like Sir Ken Robinson said, changing the system, and I'm paraphrasing, is not about necessarily about a huge movement. When you close your door and face your students, you are the change. You are changing the system. Mission accomplished.
Doesn't have to be that hard. What if it's
Have
a
to
little
be
bit
that
easier?
hard. Exactly. I love that. When I read that, I was like, I remember his book on schools. I was like, oh my God, that's it. Thank you. Yeah.
Sally, for all the people who would love to stay in touch with you or reach out to you or learn from you, where can they find you?
Come to wunderled.com, and it's Wunde with a U. I got the name in a dream. So yeah, in the middle of COVID, I had this vivid dream of a website called Wunderled. And then also Wunderled Teaching on Instagram, Wunderled Teaching on Facebook. Come hang out. I have been pretty quiet because I've had 24 was I overbooked and it was kind of a spin, but 25 is wide open and I'm not taking as many speaking engagements. So I'm not traveling as much and I'm really excited to just slow down. So you'll see me on social media. It's happening in 25.
I am Renee Jean Lemieux here with the Forward Movement Podcast. We have had Sally Haughey with us today. It has been such a pleasure. Thank you for your time, attention, and may all the seeds simply grow as they desire to grow in the time it desires to grow in.
Beautiful. Thank you.